With Can't Fear Your Own World covered, let's go through an analysis of Aizen's character, as well as some overarching themes of his. Throughout Bleach, Aizen was an agent of chaos, one of the many in Bleach. He constantly sought change through chaotic means alongside his unparalleled ambitions to become the supreme ruler of the world, with incalculable patience to plot for such a long time. Aizen was one of the biggest driving forces in Bleach, if not the biggest one, and you can see that from the earlier section where I explained exactly what he planned. With despair being a recurring theme in Bleach, all characters bear the brunt of it, and you can assume that it was even felt by the notorious Sosuke Aizen. Perhaps Aizen most felt despair through living in a world that was not ruled by anyone, a world that stunted evolution and frowned upon transcendence in his eyes. Or rather, he felt the despair of not changing the world despite how perfect he may think he is. Despair of not leaving your mark, which may have very well led to his actions. Perhaps the most prevalent theme associated with Aizen would be evolution. The chaotic nature of Aizen allowed him to evolve at rates only paralleled by his unlikely protege, Ichigo Kurosaki. Most of Aizen's exploits seem to stem from this urge for evolution. His dabbling with hollows and holification, as well as his role in the ascent of Ichigo attest to this. You can only evolve so much on your own, but with a worthy challenger that pushes you to your limits, the growth for someone with infinite potential would be endless. Perhaps that is why he caused so much trouble while taking such an interest in Ichigo. It felt like Aizen had nothing to challenge himself, and so he had to create a challenge. He needed to create obstacles to drive him to further evolve. Villains in general are often given backstories to help humanize them, to help the readers more so relate to them. But for Aizen, he has none of this. Kubo himself mentioned he wasn't a fan of the trope because he would rather the fans have a divide with the characters. And that could very well be the reason why Aizen is so beloved. He was on an inconceivable level, one that fans cannot truly fathom and come to relate to. He was the absolute best, and his loss came from hoping that he could have an equal out of the loneliness of being the best. Again, something that the majority of people could not personally relate to. With the grey morality of Bleach explored in the light novels, let's dive upon the question that is brought upon with every villain. Was Aizen truly wrong? Despite his actions, everything did seem to work out for the better, for those who survived, that is. The countless conflicts led to stronger, more developed, more capable fighters to ward off any threats. That we can agree upon. But what about from a moral standpoint? Let's hear both sides. Aizen was an advocate of evolution. His exploits resulted in countless advancements in terms of powers and abilities. Could you say that is a bad thing? If the keepers of the world truly were keeping back the evolution of the realms and its residents, could Aizen really have been wrong? Would you say it is a crime against the world to stick to the old ways rather than evolve and advance to become better? Of course, the answer usually lies in the way the person enacts their ideals, the way they seek to bring upon change. And that is the difference between the so-called heroes and villains, with the other difference being the loser and the victor. Something Sosuke Aizen is far too familiar with. The obvious question with Aizen that comes up on this topic is, can you really justify the countless killings for evolution? For progress? You cannot. No matter the intentions, it doesn't matter at the end of the day. As the poet Khalil Gibran would say, the smallest act of kindness is worth more than the greatest intention. The actions are far more important than intent, especially when lives are involved. However, one thing we do know is that history is written by the victors, and that is no different from our world. Once you attain complete victory, none of the aforementioned matters, as you now have access to history and you can rewrite it to whatever you would want it to be, which is something the leaders of the world have undoubtedly done. Ichibe's powers are closely linked to that, with him not only being able to write history as a leader of the Shinigami, but through his powers as well, having the ability to hide and manipulate names. Now what about the morality of Aizen? Aizen's moral standpoint can be considered to be ethical egoism, which is categorized when people act according to their own self-interest rather than the benefit of others. Aizen perhaps had the betterment of the world in mind, but by the looks of it, that was just a facade. Through all of Aizen's killings and machinations, you can assume Aizen sought to reign supreme for his own self-interest rather than for the sake of others. If he truly cared about others and wanted a better world, he wouldn't have killed as many people as he did. He would have sought a better, more desirable way for improvement, and a better, more desirable fate for all those deaths he had a part in. Throughout Bleach, you can understand that Aizen thinks very highly of himself. He believes there is a great divide between him and the majority of the Bleach characters. He believes he knows far more than everyone else, and so no one can truly fathom his reasoning, which could very well be true. For those reasons, however, he lacks empathy and believes that he knows what is best, when in truth, his lack of empathy is why he does not know what is best for everyone. That is why Aizen takes upon the ends justify the means philosophy. It is why most villains of Bleach take on the same viewpoint. For more on morality, check out my Death Note video, the first video I ever made on this channel, for a longer discussion on moral theories and ethics. Aizen is a great example of a character who seeks to bring upon change, a revolution, and in doing so he becomes a monster. As discussed in my Can't Fear Your Own World intro video, it is often the ones who want to bring upon the most change with good intentions that bring the worst harm. The revolutionaries of our world are quite similar in how their ideals seem to be righteous and virtuous, but the path to reach them was far from it. It is through the path of enacting their ideals that their ideals themselves degenerate far from the initial goal. Aizen's story also shows us that no matter how evil you can be perceived, the most condemned of people can always show heroic qualities. The villain can always wander down the path of redemption and be a hero in the eyes of some. In most stories, the villain, in their eyes, see themselves as the hero. Most Bleach villains fall into the same category, with one exception. A certain wicked being, who I will eventually cover, so be sure to sub so you don't miss out. Now back to Aizen. It is no secret that the Soul King debacle is of interest to Sosuke Aizen. What happens in a world without God? When God has been killed and its remnants have been used to rule the world, is this the optimal state of a world without an autonomously functioning God? Well, if God is dead, why not have someone rise and replace it? Thus is the tale of Sosuke Aizen, and fans have drawn many connections between Aizen and Friedrich Nietzsche's work. Let's explore these connections. Nietzsche is known for making the statement, God is dead. By this he was alluding to the loss of faith and meaning derived from God and religion, thus resulting in a dark period for humanity. However, according to Nietzsche, this is necessary for the evolution of a greater being that transcends all those around him, all those in the past. This being was coined as the Übermensch. All of this is very fitting in the Bleach world. This is because the statement of God is dead is not taken figuratively like Nietzsche did through metaphors, but literally. In Bleach we learn of the Soul King, the linchpin of the world, a mutilated being in stasis between life and death, who holds the realms together. The Soul King would seem to be a literal definition of God is dead. Then comes the Übermensch, which many have likened to Sosuke Aizen. Übermensch has often been translated as Overman or Superman. To summarize, it stands for the superior man, a man who transcends all those around him, a man who will create his own set of values outside the influence of God, religion, and societal norms. Someone who does not follow the status quo like all others, but embodies the characteristics of a Superman, an ideal human. There is more to all these terms, but to make things simple, that's as far as I will go. And so ask yourself, what happens when a world that has run on God for so long comes to the realization that God is dead? When a world no longer follows God and religion? This will lead to moral decay, suffering, but in Nietzsche's eyes, it will eventually birth the rise of an Übermensch. This in a way is what happened in Bleach, with Aizen finding out of the Soul King. For Aizen, we don't know why or how he became himself, but in the loss to Ichigo and Kisuke, his final words would lead us to assume that the Soul King had a part in it. To be ruled by a lifeless being, a being considered dead, must have been a factor in his ascent. For Nietzsche, an antidote to the despair of no longer running in a world where God is prevalent in the hearts of all was the Übermensch, which is again what Aizen could be likened to, as one of the select beings who knew of the Soul King. Furthermore, Aizen states that he goes against everyone who tries to control him, which relates to the Übermensch quality of creating your own set of values and going against the status quo. This is also fitting of the Nietzschean concept of master morality, morality of the strong-willed, the powerful, the morality of the masters and rulers compared to those of slaves. To add on to this, the opposite of the Übermensch would be the last man, a being who lacks the qualities of an Übermensch, a being who is characterized to seek comfort, stability, who is complacent and lacks ambition, a being who seeks to keep the status quo rather than creating his own values, which is important in this case. This term would more so fit Kisuke Urahara. It is not a perfect fit, but it does more so represent the way he sees the world and how he operates in comparison to Aizen. Through Aizen's speech, we hear how he despises Kisuke, for despite his intellect, he does not choose to create a world of his own, choosing not to do anything to change the world, at least in the eyes of Aizen. Kisuke chooses to accept the world as how it is, which is a last man characteristic compared to Aizen, who strives to change the world to his ideals, a more Übermensch characteristic. That said, these concepts are not what makes these characters, they are just one of the many ideologies that fit them. And this is not to say that the Übermensch or the last man is right. On paper, one may seem right, but when put in practice, it is not always the case, as seen with Aizen and Kisuke, with Kisuke being seen as the more righteous one. To end things off with Nietzsche and Aizen, I think Aizen's defeat is ironic since Nietzsche himself went mad near the end of his life. As Ichigo mentioned, he felt loneliness in Aizen's blade, and if you attribute Aizen's loss to his internal longing for a rival, with the Hogyoku granting that, then it was Aizen who defeated himself. So Nietzsche losing it is similar to Aizen himself losing it and how their own mental issues led to their downfall. Now what about Aizen's relation to mythology? Well, just off Aizen's name, you can draw reference to Buddhist mythology through Aizen Myo-o. Aizen Myo-o, with the Sanskrit name of Ragaraja, is one of the wisdom kings in Buddhism. Aizen Myo-o has one face and 6 arms, which could be symbolic to Aizen's demon butterfly form, with the arms perhaps being the tentacles or whatever it is. Aizen Myo-o was also said to be depicted as aiming a bow to the heavens, which could be symbolic of his conquest to take over the Soul King's palace and reign supreme. This being was also known to have the ability to cut through illusions through a Vajra, which is fitting for Sosuke Aizen, considering his illusory abilities. Myo-o also holds a lotus, which could relate to his Zanpakuto ability, more on this later. Aizen Myo-o was known for transforming carnality and lust into spiritual awakening and enlightenment. This could be likened to integrating that hollow side to ascend to new heights and evolve into something greater, which is something he has taken an interest in. Myo-o also has a third eye on his forehead, and while Aizen does not have one, he does have a sort of imprint on it in his chrysalis form. The third eye is known to provide perception beyond ordinary sight, and if there ever was a Bleach character who would have this, other than almighty users, I'd say Aizen would be a great fit. In addition, there's also the wish-fulfilling jewel, the Chintamani, which is popular in Hindu and Buddhist mythologies. This can be likened to the Philosopher's Stone of alchemy, and in a sense, characters like Aizen and Urahara are alchemists. The jewel was known to be held by Aizen Myo-o, which is another similarity, as well as Kanon, who was related to Urahara, who also had his own Hogyoku. Although Aizen Myo-o does more so represent Komamura's Bankai, and even Zaraki's Bankai through appearance, this being does share some similarities to Aizen through everything previously mentioned, but mainly through the name. Speaking of Aizen's name, it supposedly stands for indigo. When split up, the I could stand for love, and the Zen, thought or meditation. So love of thought or meditation, kind of fitting for the one who supposedly plans everything. Now what about his Zanpakuto in Kyoka Suigetsu? Kyoka Suigetsu manipulates the 5 senses of his opponents to create a perfect illusion. It literally translates into mirror, flower, water, moon. This is what is known as a Yoji Jukugo, which are 4 character idioms, sayings that can be generalized into 4 characters or kanji. Yoji Jukugo itself is a great example as it is made of 4 characters, meaning 4 characters, wise word. In essence, it is summarizing a saying or lesson in 4 words, and so there is some interpretation needed as you cannot always tell the full story in 4 words. As for mirror, flower, water, moon, it is a Yoji Jukugo of a Chinese idiom which translates into flower seen in the mirror, moon on the water's surface. And so Kyoka Suigetsu represents something beautiful that is seemingly close and desirable but unattainable. something that looks like it can be touched or reached, but in reality it cannot. Perhaps an object or a goal that one may want to seek, that seems to be in front of you, thought to be close, but in reality you are far from it. The flower seen in the mirror is not the actual flower but a reflection of it, an illusion. The moon in the water is not the actual moon but again a reflection, a mere mirage. We hear something similar to this when Byakuya fought Renji. Byakuya would say that he was the moon and Renji was the monkey sitting to reach the moon through the reflection in the water. All in all, stating he was far above Renji in ways he did not understand. Now back to Kyoka Suigetsu. Imagine if someone wanted to touch the flower, the moon, and they went through the mirror and hurt themselves, or if they jumped into the water and drowned. That is what Aizen's ability represents, and it does well to highlight his illusory abilities and his ideologies that those around him are all in a facade, an illusion going after the wrong thing. At least in Aizen's eyes, he believes everyone is seeing things from a limited perspective. When he activates his Zanpakuto's abilities, all of this is true. The Zanpakuto is an extension of the soul, and so it does well to represent Aizen through his illusory nature. There is some irony to his abilities and character as well, as he himself fell to the mirage of being undefeatable. Furthermore, him gaining immortality from the Ogyoku after seemingly regretting it from his final words in Muken in regards to courage shows off some irony as well. Aizen himself said, fear is necessary for evolution, the very fear that any given moment you could perish and vanish from existence. But Aizen would lose that fear with the Hogyoku, and so in a way he was living in an illusion. He was chasing after that flower in the mirror, the moon in the water. Aizen's released command of Shatter refers to the mirror, the destruction of the illusion of the mirror. This brings into question, why only Shatter? Why is there no relation to water or moon? Perhaps if Aizen was to go Bankai, his release command would make more use of the different words. Aizen and his pupil in Tozen share some similarities in abilities and what they represent as well, with ignorance being a big one. Again, see Tozen's video for more on this. While Tozen wipes out the 5 senses in his Bankai, Aizen manipulates them with his Shikai. Both were also seemingly blinded by their powers in their defeat, blinded by their own ignorance, which is an important teaching in Buddhism. The evolution of Aizen's forms speaks to his ideologies as well, as he is a good proponent of metamorphosis, transformation, transcendence. For Aizen, perfection is not the goal, but evolution. While Moriyuri tackles this perfection debacle through scientific improvement, Aizen tackles it through transcendence and evolution of the self, breaking the boundaries of what was thought to be possible with his ever-evolving nature, progressing through different forms. This can be further symbolized through Aizen's chrysalis form, a cocoon-like state, and then evolving into what seemed like a monstrous butterfly, and then still continuing to evolve even when a butterfly would supposedly be the last stage of evolution. Even with the demon butterfly, Aizen was yet to reach his zenith. There were still ways to go. This was not perfection. But to do that, Aizen needed something to push himself further in the form of Ichigo and Urahara. Aizen constantly sought ways to further evolve, whether that be holification, the Hogyoku, fear, and even catering the rise of a heroic hybrid. Even at the supposed end of the evolution chain, the butterfly form, Aizen would continue to evolve, breaking the status quo and destroying what was thought to be possible. I'm sure he would have kept on evolving as well if the fight continued on. To continue on further, some of Aizen's quotes and poems show us much in regards to his character. The poem Flower on the Precipice highlights the beauty of a flower growing in a place it was not meant to, a place that we would never even have access to. While all other flowers are rooted deep within the ground, this one took to the skies. Aizen assigns the trait of courage to the flower for continuing to thrive, for stepping into the sky, despite many believing it had no chance to survive. In a way, Aizen is telling us to do what is thought to be impossible, while others fear. Have the courage to go above and beyond, like the flower growing on the edge. Don't let the fears of this world and society condition you to believe what is possible and what isn't. Discover the truth and don't let the fear of others' opinions hold you back from being exceptional. All of this can tie back to his speech on courage as well. In a way, Aizen is that very flower on the precipice, the lone anomaly in the world's escarpment. Furthermore, we see this poem under the chapter of God is Dead. This further accentuates the divide Aizen believes he has between everyone else. We know he thinks he is superior, and so this quote shows us that. It further pushes his reasoning for evolution, as he believes apes, people, and gods are all tied together, seeking to become something greater than them all. This also ties into his speech on how gods are born. Aizen's knowledge on the Soul King must have shaped his perspective in the aforementioned quotes. It explains why he looks down on godhood, knowing that the Soul King is pretty much dead. It also shows his views on everyone else as those of the herd following others, relying on others rather than becoming self-sufficient and living their own lives with their own set of values. For Aizen, he believes others need blind obedience to function, a god or a king to lead them, and through all other aspects of his character you can conclude that he sees this as a weakness, which isn't necessarily true. Maybe this is because this was once Aizen's perspective before he learned of the Soul King, and so maybe he is speaking from experience. These quotes also demonstrate a chain of evolution, from ape to people, from people to kings to gods. And so this brings up the question, what is after that? The supreme ruler? The king of gods? In the real? What is next? Based on what we know of Aizen, through these quotes, you can sort of see Aizen's ambition to transcend into the next stage. Imagine if you are nearly perfect, if you are constantly evolving and you find out the next stage is a dead god, how would you feel? Well, for Aizen, he was let down, understandably. And so this helps you better understand his hatred for the Soul King, seeing the next stage of evolution as a lifeless linchpin of the world. Aizen's quote in regards to truth or lies is also very important. As mentioned earlier, Aizen is a seeker of truth, a very catalyst for spreading hidden facts. This quote shows off his propensity for finding the truth, the importance he places on it, as well as why he believes he is superior to most. He believes everyone lives in an illusion, a fairy tale, choosing to believe only what is convenient to them. He says that the truth is radically different from others, and it is different from the cold, hard facts. Looking at our world, things do not seem so different. The average person chooses to believe the facts convenient to them, often the first things they hear without ever contemplating the validity. No wonder the news outlets will tell us the news that is convenient to them when the majority of the people soak it up. And so when discussing the truth, it's important to differentiate between this, from what you like to hear, what they'd like you to hear, and finally, the cold hard facts. In these cases, some skepticism is healthy to have. Too much or too little can be problematic, but having a balance in this seems like a good way to live. Aizen's perspective is that of an extreme as well. To live a life seeking to learn all the world's secrets could damage your psyche greatly, and seen by the various Bleach characters, more of which I'll discuss in their own videos. Some may choose to live a simple life, one of delusion, which is probably what Aizen would say. For some, that is what gives them joy and peace. But for Aizen and those who advocate for the truth and seeking out this knowledge, that is not the case. The truth in the Bleach world is dark, and it could bring out the worst in you, and the history of our world is no different. But I do believe seeking the truth is better than living in ignorance. Finding the right balance between everything is very important. Aizen was also likened as the gaze in the sun by Kubo, so let's try to understand what is meant by this. In a symbolic sense, the sun is like a patriarchal figure, like a wise old leader. It represents the divine masculine. When the sun is out, it is like you're in the presence of a strict elder. You bow down your head and get to work. You don't directly look up and stare out of respect and authority. And of course, with the sun, you cannot directly gaze into it for long periods without hurting yourself. And so to liken someone to the gaze in the sun shows their rebellious nature, their tendency to do something out of the norm. This, in a way, symbolizes Aizen not being afraid of the consequences from the rulers, whether it be the Gote, Central 46, or the Zero Squad. It also shows that Aizen is an anomaly, being able to gaze into the sun, something most people cannot do without taking damage. The gaze in the sun could also be taken symbolically for his conquest to reign supreme over the heavens. The sun shines over all, and so perhaps it signifies Aizen seeking to stand above everyone and dictate the world just like the sun does. To gaze into the sun means to blind you, and so maybe the phrase represents Aizen's abilities in Kyokusugetsu, which can blind you to an extent that you don't know what is truly happening. Kubo often uses symbolism with the sun and the moon, so it could have different meanings. For example, Ichigo is often referred to as the Black Sun, The black sun, the missing sun, is easier to gaze at and does not blind you, and it was Ichigo who beat Aizen. It was Ichigo who was not blinded by Kyoka-Sugetsu. Also, it was Ichigo who truly understood Aizen by the end of their battle. Or the phrase could have an entirely different meaning. That was just me trying to make sense of it. Let me know what you think. For Aizen, there are always new levels to reach, new peaks to conquer. There is always an opportunity to shatter what was thought to be possible, and Aizen does this through the betterment of the self. This allowed him to transcend his limits as well as everyone around him, and it was done through gaining knowledge and exposing himself to trials. To be able to evolve like this, you must be formless and constantly changing. You must not over-identify too much with who you are or who you once were, but instead put your focus on what you can be and be open to change. If we could learn anything from Aizen, it would be that. Through knowledge gained with it being rigorously applied, we can learn how to better ourselves and evolve. But the theoretical aspect is not enough. You need experience on the field to sharpen and mold yourself. Like a swordsmith, we must shape and cultivate the blade, forge our souls through trial and circumstance, the swinging of blades, iron against iron, steel against steel, and finally, soul against soul is a time-tested way to evolve and get better. Through knowledge of evolution, holification, through the deep desire to evolve for the better, Hogoku, and through trials, opponents, Aizen has amplified his growth and become what he is today. In short, despite being the closest thing to perfection, Aizen showed us that it cannot be attained, because there is always another way to evolve, another form to reach, and you can expect Aizen to continue to evolve in the future. Through the series we learned that the world is grey and complex. There are multiple sides to everything, and so we must understand all perspectives when uncovering the truth, rather than believing what everyone thinks. We must focus on the cold hard facts instead of trusting what is convenient. Don't just accept the world as how it is, but strive to make it how it should be. Be the pioneer for change and evolution, but do so in a less chaotic and radical way, of course. Don't go around killing and manipulating everyone around you, please. Have the courage to separate yourself from the others. Don't blindly follow everyone around you like you are under someone's version of Kyoka-Sugetsu. See through the illusions, break through the herd-like conditioning, and live a life fitting for you. Evolve in ways that others never would have thought were possible, shattering everyone's conception of what can be accomplished. All the while, spread some knowledge, spread the truth like a messenger from the heavens, so that you can help others evolve as well. I believe all of this is what Aizen stood for, and I'm sure he would advocate the above as well. These are all great qualities of Aizen, but he also holds some negative ones, mainly in his manipulative nature and lack of empathy. Aizen saw a problem in the world, and to fix it, he would bring upon much conflict, chaos, and death. It could be that this was the only way, but I find that hard to believe, especially with someone as powerful and intelligent as Aizen. Aizen in a way shows you what not to do, the true mentality of a loser. If you see a problem, work to fix it, but don't go around killing people and causing this much destruction. With such intelligence, to waste it on killing would be a disservice to your soul. To fall in such weak ways, to change the world by raising those around you is the greatest way you can do it, rather than slitting the throats of those who are no longer useful to you. Look no further than the winner, the hero of the world, in Ichigo for that. Perhaps that is why he was the victor and Aizen was the loser. It was Ichigo who won the battle of ideologies, and that was why he was victorious. These devilish qualities of Aizen leads on to the next topic, archetypes. Aizen's birthday is on May 29th. Astrologically speaking, this makes him born under the sign of Gemini. Now, I would assume that Aizen's birthday does not serve any importance to the story, but through the archetypes of the zodiac sign it does fit his character. Gemini is a sign that is ruled by the planet Mercury, which represents communication, thoughts, logic, intellect, curiosity, and so on. The planet represents rational and non-emotional thought, which is all fitting for Aizen. Gemini is also an air sign, with air signs being known as the deep thinkers, the communicators of the zodiac. Furthermore, Gemini is a mutable sign, which is considered to be versatile and highly adaptable. It represents constant change, which is very fitting for the ever-evolving enigma. All of this corresponds to Aizen's character, as he is seen as a logic-centered, intelligent person, a versatile being with a sharp wit. The symbol for Gemini is the two twins, and it represents the dualistic nature of those born under this sign. Geminis have the stereotype of being two-faced, of being deceptive tricksters able to put on different masks, which is quite fitting for Aizen. The duality is important for those in this sign. It allows them to see different perspectives. Gemini is a bridge between both sides, between yin and yang, good, bad, opposing viewpoints. It is the collector and distributor of information, which represents the two sides as seen by the symbol. Mercury is the messenger of the gods in mythology, and so Gemini is very much like a messenger in that way, the learner and communicator of ideas. In Aizen's case, he'd impose his view on others, and he did well to represent the Gemini archetype, being a catalyst of the truth, the revealer of many secrets of his world. This can also be seen by Aizen spreading holification. Gemini is a curious sign, a social one, which you can relate to Aizen, with him again knowing the secrets of the world and him being a popular Gote captain at one point. Gemini are best known to employ their weapons as words, and Aizen is perhaps the greatest at this among all Bleach characters. Finally, the motto for Gemini, the dominant keyword would be I think, which is very fitting for Aizen, the man who plans everything. In short, Aizen fits well with the archetypes associated with Gemini. An archetype that would be fitting to Aizen would be that of a fallen angel. The fallen god slash angel archetype is prevalent in mythology and many stories throughout time. One popular example of this would be Lucifer. Incredible amounts of pride, a notable sin, had caused Lucifer to fall. It was also through pride and a bit of trickery that humanity was cast away from the Garden of Eden, as they sought to become like God. The same can be said of the prideful Aizen. The god of death sought to reign supreme over the heavens in a domain that wasn't his, and as a result he'd commit inexplicable acts of treachery. It is often considered that pride is the worst sin of all, the original sin that leads to all others. The thought that you alone will reign supreme over the world brings upon all kinds of vices and sins. It allows you to justify any sort of heinous act, and that is what happened to Aizen. Yes, he had the betterment of the world in mind, but through his actions you may think otherwise. This pride can be seen in most Bleach characters, but no one is close to the dangerous amounts that Sosuke Aizen possesses. It was pride that casted Aizen down from godhood as a Shinigami, and it was pride that led to his defeat, pride of a lonely kind, pride that made Aizen feel that no one was near him. The excess of pride is a characteristic of evil, and while I have said a lot vouching for Aizen, it could very well have been that Aizen just sought power and control over all, and he used the Soul King debacle as an excuse to defect and conquer. The devilish aspect of deception is also the main trait of Aizen. The devil is considered to be the ultimate deceiver, and so this adds to Aizen's notoriety, as well as how he is perceived by all. To deceive is considered to be more of a cowardly tactic, rather than settling your quarrels face to face with strength. Maybe that is what Kenpachi would think, someone who is all about direct confrontation. I am sure someone as loyal as Ichigo would think this to be cowardly as well, but to deceive on such a level as Aizen did requires loads of intelligence as well, so it is not without skill. But still it is frowned upon. Those who deceive their own kind are considered to be scum of the earth, and so it is fitting with this fallen angel archetype. All of this is not to say Aizen was based on such beings as the devil. It is just to show one of the many archetypes that fall within his character. The devil may be the one who seeks to lead others astray, and although Aizen is very devil-like in his manipulation, it's through his lessons that he teaches us to think on your own, something that is the exact opposite of what the devil would want us to do. All that said, if we are to label Aizen as such, we must do the same with many Shinigami, especially those who were part of the original sin in Bleach, the Soul King's mutilation, the very Shinigami who founded the Bleach world we know today. To be a part of such a thing, you must have had to be deceptive and prideful. Who truly is the fallen god in this case? Aizen, or the ones who mutilated God, the ones who forced the Soul King into a state of neither alive nor dead, the ones who sought to overthrow the old worlds in Aizen, was no different from the founding clan members who did the same in a way. Is it victory that decides who the fallen angel is? The victors who write history? How can we be so sure that this fallen angel was not on the right side in a world marred by treachery, in a world bleached by grey?
You know how much I despise you! With your great intellect, why is it you don't take independent action? Why in the world did you choose to subjugate yourself to that thing? That's an argument only a loser would make! I think you should speak of how the world should be, rather than how the world currently operates! I refuse to accept the world ruled by that thing! I am a victor! I shall decide how the world should be!
Shatter the cracked mirror. Differentiate between truth and lie. Clear your emotions. Make the path clearer. Stay clear of limitations that cloud the eye. Disperse the reflected moon. Don't drown to delusion's wrath. To mediocrity no one is immune, so have courage to take your own path. Ever scheming and treacherous was the king of lies, who labored hard to surpass the god in disguise. From Shinigami to humans and all between he'd cut ties. As for him all others were mere apes in disguise, with power and ideas most cannot comprehend. The deceiver would employ them in ways that would offend. The world he sought to change would be the one he would defend, all for the opportunity to evolve, transcend, making an appearance only when there is a cataclysmic brawl, regulated to a throne of dark solitude, with only his life to recall. For despite being the transcendent one, leagues above all, it was his greatness that ultimately led to his fall. How can you judge right or wrong when you are blind? When it's your very outlook that is confined? How can you change the course of mankind when the problem originates within your mind? How can you understand when your thoughts cannot perceive what it is you truly want, what it is you can achieve? How can you comprehend when it's your senses that deceive what the world is like that you truly are naive? The world is filled with treachery, so open your eyes. All you may have known may very well be a guise. The world may seem manipulated to shepherd man, but know how things go is only up to you to plan. Think for yourself instead of blindly following convenient views. You are the one in control. Your life is up to you to choose. Seek the truth to dispel the confusion. Live by them and dissolve the illusion. To overcome a crisis that is existential, shatter the limitations of your potential. You are only as great as your resolve. So when met with hardship, seek to evolve. In your path of ascension to your throne, heed the words and let them be known. Be wary of the supposed righteous who lie in sleuth, and pay attention to the one who lies while speaking the truth.